Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of the Green New York training webinars that we've been holding for folks on various topics. My name is Brendan Woodruff. I'm the Director of Sustainability for DEC. I'm really excited to be putting on today's webinar. We've got Connor Shea from DEC's Pollution Prevention Unit, who's been doing a lot of fantastic work in the realm of greener disinfectants, which is something that has come top of mind over the last year and a half or so. So a couple of housekeeping things. Everybody is on mute when you enter the webinar. If you do have questions, please type them into the chat box. We will get to those at the end of the webinar. So any questions, type them in the chat box. We'll get them to Connor at the end. This is also being recorded, and we will be posting this on the Green New York SharePoint site and potentially in a few other places as well. So if you would like a copy of this afterwards, in addition to the recording, put your email in the chat and we can get that right over to you. So without further ado, I want to hand it over to DEC's Connor Shea.
All right, thank you, Brendan. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good to go.
All right, thank you. All right, thanks for the introduction. So yeah, like Brendan mentioned, I'm Connor Shea. I'm part of DEC's Pollution Prevention Unit. I also serve as a subject matter expert under the Green NY structure on toxics reduction. So today, I wanted to present on greener disinfectants. That's part of the purview of what I cover as a subject matter expert. So I just want to go over the idea of, what disinfectants are, what makes some of them more environmentally preferable or greener than others, and ways you can find them on contract. So next slide, please. So yeah, let's just start by getting a few definitions out of the way. So there are several closely related things that we all do and that cleaning and operations staff do that we're going to look at. So the first one is cleaning. So this is something that's done to remove pathogens. So pathogens include germs, bacteria, viruses, dirt and impurities from surfaces or objects. The next one down, getting into a little bit more stringent regulated territory, is sanitizing. So this is something that's done to lower the number of pathogens on a surface to a safe level, and that is in accordance with public health standards. And the last one is disinfecting. So disinfecting is something that's done to kill pathogens on a surface, per the definition. And it's something that should only be done after cleaning, otherwise it will be less effective. If you don't clean first, then the germs and viruses can hide under, the dirt and the impurities, and the disinfecting won't be that effective. So next slide, please. So we're just going to be focusing on that last one for today. Next slide, please. Okay, so here we have a scene that we all became familiar with during the early days of the pandemic, and I'm sorry to say, but it's still here. So we have someone disinfecting a public space, and they're wearing what's called level C personal protective equipment to protect themselves from not only the pathogens, but also from the chemicals that they are applying to kill those pathogens. So this kind of brings us to our main point. Many of the chemicals that we use to disinfect public spaces are harsh and toxic, and that is, that's really by necessity. We need to be applying something that is capable of destroying these pathogens. So that often necessitates the use of those harsh toxic chemicals. Next slide, please. But, in some cases, the active ingredients that are used in disinfectants, these can include things that are asthmagens, endocrine disruptors, irritants, sensitizers. They can be corrosive, they can be toxic. So what we're really looking to do is, find options that avoid any of those active ingredients that, contain those asthmagens, irritants, corrosive, toxic chemicals. So the reason we want to do that is to, avoid exacerbating health conditions. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. So because the state has recognized that there are hazards associated with many of the products that agencies buy, and it wants to use its purchasing power to move the market in a greener, more environmentally preferable direction, way back under Governor Patterson, we issued Executive Order 4. So that was the executive order. I'm sure many of you are aware, it established a state green procurement and agency sustainability program. So under the order, a specification was developed for disinfectants and sanitizers. Next slide, please. Now we have to ask the question, what makes a particular disinfectant greener than another? So if you look at what's prescribed in the specification, there are a few different attributes that separate the green ones from the not so green ones. But first, I'd like to mention that, the green disinfectant specification, the first thing it does is it prioritizes green cleaning first and then says that you should only be disinfecting when needed. So that's an important point to think about. You should only be even considering disinfecting when green cleaning is not going to accomplish the job. Once you've determined that you need to disinfect, you want to look at the EO4 specification, which includes the following characteristics for greener disinfectant. So, a greener disinfectant product should avoid the following types of active ingredients. So anything that is considered a human carcinogen under IARC. You want to avoid anything that's listed under California Prop 65. So that deals with chemicals that cause birth defects, reproductive harm. And you also want to avoid anything that is considered an asthmagen by AOEC. So a couple very well-known examples of disinfecting active ingredients that are considered asthmagens, quaternary ammonium compounds and bleach. These are two very regularly used active ingredients in disinfectants. So that's something we should all be aware of. And next, moving on down to the encouraged active ingredients. So we went through what we want to avoid. Now here's what's encouraged. So we have a list of 4 different active ingredients that have been tested and reviewed by, I believe it was the Massachusetts Toxics Use Reduction Institute way back in the day when this specification was being developed for multiple states to use. So 4 different active ingredients in disinfectants that they determined to be safer are L-lactic acid, citric acid. This is something that we're seeing popping up in more and more disinfectants on the market. Caprylic acid, octanoic acid, that's another name for caprylic acid, and hydrogen peroxide. So that's something that we're also seeing popping up in more and more disinfectant products, and that's a good thing to see. We're getting away from, just using bleach and quats in those products. So another thing that I should mention that, is sort of a helpful identifier that you can see right on the packaging when purchasing disinfectants are the Green Seal logo and the Underwriters Labs Eco logo certifications. So we have the pictures of those right there. So these certifications are considered desired but not required attributes. So these are sort of the ins and outs of the EO4 criteria. And, another important thing to point out is that EO4's specifications, they don't supersede existing regulations. So if you work in a healthcare setting, or, you work in a school, food service setting, there might be certain health regulations that you need to abide by that would definitely be higher in the order of precedence over Executive Order 4. But if you're sort of in a general office environment, which many of us are, then you might want to be considering using products that are compliant with Executive Order 4. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so that was the EO4 specification. Now I just want to provide a bit more detail on a couple things you should know about disinfectants. So each disinfectant is considered a pesticide because it is killing a pest, the pest in this case being, that pathogen. So because of that, it needs to be registered with EPA, and each pesticide product and label is also required to be registered with New York State with our Bureau of Pesticides Management for that particular use. And their registration status can be checked on DEC's website if you'd like to, using that link shown here. Another important note for disinfecting at your facility, you're going to want to choose something that's appropriate for your setting. So like I said, everything is registered for a particular use. So, it might be registered for agricultural use, commercial use, hospital use, institutional settings. So you want to make sure you're choosing the one that's appropriate for your setting. So if you're in an office, maybe the commercial or institutional type of application would be appropriate. And, again, since we are in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic, there are disinfectants that have been tested on this type of virus. I believe it's called an enveloped type of virus. If you're looking to use a disinfectant that's active against that, you're going to want to make sure that it's registered for use against COVID-19, and that should be on the product label. And, as with any product you're purchasing, especially a potentially harmful chemical product, you're going to want to check with your vendors if you have questions, read the labels, make sure, like I said, it's appropriate for your setting, and it's meeting your requirements. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so now we're getting into the questions that we have to ask ourselves before making that purchase. So, a couple of considerations here before I get into the exactly how and where to find these things. So, first, as is mentioned right up front in the EO4 specification, consider whether there's a need to purchase a disinfectant. Will green cleaning be enough? Will that get the job done? If so, then just continue on with green cleaning. If not, then you're going to want to start thinking about these next questions. Where is the disinfectant that you're looking at going to be used? If it's just common touch points, your door handles, your surfaces within an office environment, you can use EO4 compliant products. And so now after consulting with somebody at ITS about the topic of disinfecting, they pointed me in this direction. They said, for your IT assets, the best thing that you can do is consulting your facilities guidance or the manufacturer's guidance for finding a product that's going to be compatible with IT assets. So like your computers and all of the peripherals, your printers, that sort of thing. If you're going to be disinfecting them, you're going to want to consult the manufacturer's guidance. And then for certain other locations, as mentioned before, like your school, your healthcare setting, your food service setting, disinfecting and sanitizing practices might already be prescribed by law. So, you're going to have to follow what's in those regulations first. And then for COVID-19, if you want to find a disinfectant that's going to work on that virus, you have to make sure it's registered for use against COVID-19. And then after the pandemic is in the rearview mirror, you just need to focus on something that's appropriate for the setting that you're in. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, and one last thing on, on purchasing before we get into, what the tools are that we have available. For anyone that's out there doing purchasing for their agency already, you're probably already aware of this, but when you're making your purchases for your agency, there is what's known as the procurement order of precedence. So if we look from top to bottom, the most preferred option, this is something that you need to be considering first anytime you're making a purchase for your agency. You need to be looking at your preferred sources first. So those include CoreCraft, Preferred Source Program for people who are blind, and New York State Industries for the disabled. So you need to be considering them first when you're making your purchases. They do have green cleaning products, all of them, and each one has a limited set of disinfectants. I will note that not all of what they have available would carry that green NY logo, meaning that it does not meet the EO4 specification. So they do have some that do meet the green NY specification. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. And also, when looking at those preferred sources, I'm not sure that they identify the products that do meet the EO4 specification with, something like the green NY logo, which you can see under the New York State e-marketplace, which I'll get to a little bit later. So I just wanted to, make everyone aware of that. But, those three options must be considered first if they have the product that meets the form, function, and utility requirements. So if they have a disinfectant that is of the form and function and utility that you are looking for, then there you go, look no further, problem solved. And then if they don't, then you would move down to OGS centralized contracts. After that, agency-specific contracts, and lastly, open market purchases. So now, just because it has the easiest options for identifying Green New York products, it has that Green NY product icon that I had mentioned before. We're going to kind of look a little bit deeper into option number 2, those OGS centralized contracts for finding a greener disinfectant. So next slide, please. All right, so this is now we're going to get into, the tools that we have available under that second option for finding green disinfectants. And like I said, it's, we're jumping down to that second one just because it offers some of the easiest ways to identify green NY products. So the first option would be to consult your state green cleaning contract for a list of approved vendors. So this is OGS group number 3900, the environmentally preferable cleaning products contract. Once you're in that document, there are links to each vendor's price list, and you can search through this product listing to find products that meet your needs. So you can, just do a Control F to look for disinfectants, and then, when you identify a product on that list, you can then cross-reference it with the green disinfectants list that we've been sharing with agency sustainability coordinators, and, see if you have a match. And then, once you've found a product that that you've cross-referenced and found to be on both lists, then contact the vendor and make that purchase. As I'm describing it, yes, this option is a little bit more labor-intensive because you're cross-referencing with this green disinfectants list to make sure it's on there once you found it on the vendor's list. So, this might not be the ideal option for everybody. So there's also another option that we can talk about. Next slide, please. So a little bit more straightforward option, you can go to the eMarketplace website. This is something that is hosted by Office of General Services. So you can go to their website, and you'll see a search bar on the eMarketplace. You can type in the word disinfectant right there. This will bring up the full list of available products. A number of these might contain active ingredients that we're looking to avoid, for example, your quaternary ammonium compounds or perhaps bleach. So there is a way to filter for just products that have that green NY attribute. This means that they meet the executive order for specification. So if you go down to the bottom left side of the screen, once you've already searched for disinfectants, you can go down there, click on green NY, and this will bring up a slightly shorter list of only products that have that green NY attribute. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to show you, what exactly I'm talking about there. So this shorter list will have that green NY icon. So, you can scroll through these, click on each one and see, which one kind of meets your needs, and then, make your purchase. So like I said before, option one, a little bit more labor intensive, but it might yield a slightly larger field of different options. But this one would be quite a bit more straightforward and easy to manage. So, the choice is really up to you. Next slide, please. So now I just had a couple final notes, just a couple items to stress before everyone goes forth and makes their first purchase of a greener disinfectant. As I mentioned before, IT assets like computers and printers, these are things that everyone is touching all of the time, and of course you're going to want to disinfect these, but based on my conversation with folks over at ITS, you're going to want to consult with your facilities guidance and or your manufacturer's guidance to figure out what the best option is for disinfecting these. It sounds like there are two pretty universal truths here. You don't want to use bleach on them because it can interfere with some of the electronic components and also cause discoloration on certain materials. And also, just sort of common sense. You don't want to spray directly on the equipment. You want to spray your disinfectant on a wipe first, then wipe it on the equipment. So, those are two sort of universal truths with IT assets. Next, Department of Health has developed a number of guidance documents for disinfecting. So they have a couple on their websites. They have they have guidance for public and private facilities, guidance for disinfecting at primary and secondary schools. So, if you are in any of these locations, it might be good to just, scan through and familiarize yourself with these. Also, this is considered pretty recent. CDC put out guidance back in April. I'm hoping this hasn't been overwritten or rescinded by this point, but their guidance, what they said back in April was, in most cases, cleaning surfaces with soap and water, not disinfecting, is generally enough to reduce risk. So that kind of ties in with what's said right up front in the EO4 specification. Green cleaning is generally enough. If you can get away with that, then the buck stops right there. But if you need to go a little bit further with it and, ensure that you're killing those pathogens on the surface, then go ahead with the green disinfecting. And then, one last thing going forward, when disinfectants are determined to be needed, you want to use those that meet the EO4 specifications. And, just to summarize this very shortly, you want to use those listed active ingredients, those 4 that I mentioned before, and really some of the big ones to avoid, some of the most common hazardous active ingredients you want to avoid are bleach and those quaternary ammonium compounds. Those are the ones that are the asthmagens and sensitizers that are, potentially going to exacerbate health conditions in people working and in those spaces and applying those disinfectants. So, those are the biggest ones to avoid. So with that, I think we can move to the next slide. And I think we can just open it up for questions at this point.
Yeah, sounds good. That was fantastic, Connor. Thank you so much for putting that together and presenting it here today. We have a question that came into the chat box here. Actually, it's 2, so I'll ask it in 2 parts. The first is, can you talk about any specific ingredients that California's Prop 65 targets?
Any specific ingredients that California's Prop 65 targets? That's a good question. As I was saying that aloud, reading that slide, I was thinking that there hopefully aren't any that you could find in a disinfecting product. These are generally some pretty well-known harmful things, but things that are causing birth defects, like your plasticizers and some of those agricultural pesticides. But I could get back to whoever it was that sent that question just to, follow up on that one.
Okay. And the second part of the question here is, what is AOEC when you mention the asthmagens?
So AOEC, so they're an organization that reviews certain chemical ingredients to determine whether it has an impact on people suffering from asthma. So let me just get the full, okay, so it's the Association of Occupational and Environmental Clinics. So they on their website have a database that's sort of dedicated to, listing out all of the common sort of chemical ingredients that are considered asthmagens and sensitizers. So this could be something that's triggering some sort of allergic reaction when people come into contact with it. And asthmagens, as noted on their website, these are things that could either induce asthma in someone for the first time and, cause them to carry that with them basically chronically, or it can trigger asthma attacks in somebody that already has asthma. So they kind of distinguish those two on their website when they are listing out these chemicals that are considered asthmagens. But yeah, the short answer, Association of Occupational and Environmental Clinics.
And another question here. Have you done any research into the pricing of kind of the greener disinfectants versus your more traditional bleach and cloths?
In terms of the pricing, the greener disinfectants, from what I found, I don't have any exact numbers in front of me, but generally when you are on these websites, like the e-marketplace tool, they are generally competitive. They are, right in line with your, standard kind of bleach and quat containing disinfectants. And as I mentioned before, as the subject matter expert in toxics reduction under Green NY, annually when we're putting together that Green NY report where we're going through the data for all the agencies, one of the questions that's being asked of agencies is, and this is, more generally towards greener cleaning products, we're seeing that most agencies are really only incurring the same level of cost for buying the greener options as compared to, when they were using those non-green options for cleaning. So, generally the same holds true for the green disinfectants, but, in terms of an actual number, I don't have anything in front of me right now. I can just, generally speaking, say that they are comparable.
Mm-hmm. And if anybody has any final questions, please type them into the chat box here. I've got one final one for you. Based on the fact that there have been a lot of supply chain disruptions this year, and probably people thinking about the same topics we've been talking about today, when you were perusing the OGS e-marketplace there, was there good availability of these products?
Yeah, I will issue the caveat that I didn't actually attempt to purchase any of them myself, so I don't know if there's anything that comes up when you click purchase that says, there's a ship blocking the Suez Canal or anything like that. But yeah, it seems like the ones that they have available on their websites, they would generally be available for purchase, right away. I know that early on in the pandemic, there were supply chain issues, especially just because the demand for some of these products was so high, and I think workers in those facilities were being considered essential personnel, the facilities where they were manufacturing these. So, there was definitely some pinch felt because there was such high demand, but I think, the supply was still being pumped out for the most part. And I think, now that things have settled down a little bit, I believe we're generally back to normal with that. Okay. So were there any other questions?
Sorry about that. I was on mute. You'd think after 18 months of doing these, you'd figure it out. The last question that came in is if the slides are available. So what you can do is we'll have a recording of the webinar up on the Green New York SharePoint site. So you'll be able to locate that there. If you would like just the slides, you can either email Connor or myself. Connor's email is up on the screen now, and I just typed mine into the chat box. So either way, send us an email and we'll be able to get those slides to you. And with that, any final thoughts, Connor, that you want to leave people with today?
No, I think, it was all pretty much covered in the presentation, but, just if you're in a position where you can, make greener purchases for your agency, especially with something like this where, it's got the potential to impact the health of those around you, just put in your due diligence and find the product that's going to have the least impact and, get the job done safely and effectively.
Sounds good. So thank you so much, Connor, for presenting today. Thank you to everybody else for joining us. Again, a recording of this will be up on the Green New York SharePoint site, and please send us an email if you do want a copy of the slides. Thank you very much, everybody, and we'll see you soon.